so that people don't get confused.
So it's recording. What time is it your side, Dan? What time is it
It's 8 o'clock here in Phoenix, Arizona.
What did you say, sorry?
8 in the morning.
8 in the morning, yeah. Thanks for joining us early.
Yeah.
For me, it's 4 p.m.
That's a good time for everybody then.
Yeah, it's the best time for the, we try to find a good time period for everyone in the world. This was the best. Depends on the time zones, but usually 4 p.m. at my zone is the best. Just wait 1 or 2 minutes more, and then we'll start.
Okay.
Okay, so I think let's start. It's time to start. Hello everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Thank you for joining us in this webinar from the Informs Aviation Application section. This is the first webinar from this year, following the tradition that we started last year. So the idea from this webinars is to invite an expert in a domain that can inspire us on our research and our future career. So today I'm very pleased to have Dan Muzic with us as being our presenter. Dan has nearly 2 decades of experience in revenue management and pricing systems, with a focus on operation research and revenue management systems development. His main motivation has always been to improve the intersection between operation research and airline revenue management. So this is a nice forum, I think, for this discussion. Dan's career began with American West Airlines, where he played a key role in the integration of the revenue management systems through the 2 mergers, first with US Airways and then with American Airlines. And after 17 years working with these airlines, Dan retired from American Airlines in 2018 as managing director of revenue management development. In his legacy at these companies, he developed large-scale revenue management systems with leveraged data in innovative ways to adapt to the constant evolving competitive marketplace where these airlines work. And he holds several revenue management patents for advancements in pricing, forecasting, and optimization, positioning him as being an expert in these domains and being the right speaker for us. And recently, after 5 years working at the Cactus Consulting Group, he joined Gartner Network as an advisor, helping clients to solve complex problems and using analytics to come with a good solution. So without further ado, Dan, the floor is yours. Thank you very much for being here with us.
Oh, thanks for that wonderful introduction. And thanks everyone for joining today and taking time out of your busy lives to hear me speak. And I appreciate that introduction. And as far as I go, one of the things that I'm hoping to do from all the things that Bruno just talked about is open everyone's minds here to what operations research and analytics can do as a career and for airlines and solving problems in a way that's super beneficial. In my all that time that Bruno was talking about that I worked for airlines, it was really the OR and analytics professionals that were sort of the shoulders that I stood on, and in terms of hiring and empowering and then turning loose and just doing some really fun things together. So I hope to share some of that today with you, and then we're going to talk about what sort of a bright future is coming, because we're in a time of change right now.
Sorry, let me just say that if any participant has questions, they can put it in the Q&A, and I'll ask most of these questions, or the most I can, to Dan at the end. Sorry.
Of course. Okay, so with that, I'm sure you've been seeing in the headlines, right? There's all kinds of talk about AI. AI is the buzzword of the moment across many different industries. And quite frankly, you folks in Informs are really kind of at an intersection of just really tantalizing possibilities. There's so many different directions you can go, and all of the work you're doing to be ready or in the field today is certainly going to pay off. But I'm here to talk about airlines, and operations research and analytics has always been a spectacularly good match between skill set and need. Airlines are just generally what I call a Swiss watch, highly complex things, high fixed costs, where small differences in how we do things can make huge differences in profitability. You see things all the way across how to make long haul flights more efficient using AI from a fuel burn standpoint, which of course also reduces emissions. There's all kinds of flight operations and wind forecasting. But today, what we're going to talk about is my area of expertise, which is somewhat narrow, but also super important for airline profitability. If you don't make money, it doesn't make sense to have airplanes flying around. So revenue management is at the core of all that. So when I say revenue management, let's quickly define exactly what it means to be in revenue management. For those of you who don't know, like I said, we sit at the heart of the commercial part of an airline. And what revenue management does fundamentally, if you take one thing away from this presentation today, is what this concept is of how airlines actually price and sell, like especially when you're sitting on the other side of a website. I'm sure most of you have flown, have purchased tickets, maybe wondered how these prices are come up with. What revenue management does is we try to provide the right product at the right time to the right customer. So I'm going to quickly break that down, because it's going to be important as we go through this talk today, what these different elements are. So product. In the case of an airline, the network is the product. Nonstop versus connection. Of course, people don't want to fly connection unless they need to. Time of day, morning versus evening. Do you have a large frequency of flights? So if things change, I can make some changes and not be stranded because I only fly a particular route a few times a week. Is the airport location in a convenient place, or is it far away? Or am I flying in first class versus a coach? So all those things boiling together, that's what the product is. So when you recognize the product, then you start to have an idea as to how I might be able to price this. So the next dimension is time. So how are seats like almost like dairy milk sitting in the grocery store? Well, when milk expires in a grocery store, it can never be resold. It must be thrown away. Seats similarly are perishable inventory. If they aren't sold at time of departure, gone forever, never have a chance to sell again. But that element of time also provides a risk. You could either sell it too cheaply and have regrets later in time as you get closer to a flight's departure, or not sell it at all. So how you actually price that seat has that element of time that's very important that has to be played. And then finally, there's this idea of the customer. So different customers will have a very, very large difference in what they're willing to pay. Backpacker, college student, a business person, consultant that's flying with on an expense account where they're not actually paying the amount versus somebody actually is, all will have different willingness to pays. And the art of RM is to define and determine across all those different elements how they boil together to provide the right price. So I'm going to talk quickly about how OR and analytics can be used for doing this. So the way I like to use this analogy of when you have data and you're building forecast and optimization models off of the data, it's like driving a car down the road with just the rear view mirror available to you to determine the direction that you're headed. So in this case here, what you see is you have a nice straight road behind you. And I would imagine that most people feel pretty confident as long as that road's kind of straight in front of them, that that's enough for them. So the analog here is the data that we use in all of our models is what's already happened in the past. And it's from a number of people booked, what they paid, what flights they were on, what components of the network were important, what the competition is doing. All those things get boiled together. And we have our models and algorithms. They establish prices that we believe will most profitably fill flights. However, one of the themes I'm going to talk about today is the role of the business and the intersection of science with what I'll call the art. So the art is provided by folks, the boots on the ground, the analysts. They're actually working with the systems that people like you create to actually account for changes coming in the road. So here you see we had a nice straight road behind us. Now we have curves. We've got potential for the mountains changing and some lakes and various other things that if I'm not careful, I might hit that car in front of me. I may actually steer off the road. By the time the models and the data have caught up and changed, what you see in front of you is in the rearview mirror. So a lot of the very interesting work that's done here is how do you account for future events and bring them in and enrich what's happening in the past to make the decision making better. And that's an area where things like artificial intelligence, some things I'm going to talk about a little further in the presentation, have very much a role to play to make both the systems better and the users that are actually interacting with the systems have better information at their disposal. So let's talk a little bit about data. I've been talking about data. That's what was in that rear view mirror that comprised a lot of the input into the forecast and optimization. And I talked a little bit about the Swiss watch example of airlines being quite complex creatures. You'll see that from a large airline, and I'm going to use American or United, something, or Delta for that matter, an airline that has lots of codeshare partners, in other words, international partners that sell tickets on you, they give you international reach, sprawling networks, and they give you a sense for how hard this problem is to solve. And why it's interesting is an airline like American or United will price over 150,000 different possibilities. So that would be anywhere, say, from New York to Morocco, Mexico City to Canada, Hawaii to London, and so on. All of those need a price because passengers are interested in potentially flying them. And of that, these large airlines will fly over 500,000 people a day. And on these routes, you're going to have small planes all the way up to big planes. So the risk of a large plane going out empty or selling out a small plane, of course, is commensurate to the amount of supply that you have in the market. So you have everywhere from 50 seats to 300, which is a wide divergence in the amount of seat capacities. And then you throw all of that out there, and not all airlines, but many of the large airlines will allow you to buy tickets up to 331 days into the future, just about almost a year, 11 months into the future. So when you add that all up, if you're an airline that's responsible for pricing this network, you have to account for all of those routes across all of the seats, across all that huge booking window, which means you have approximately 5 billion theoretical prices that are in play. In other words, if somebody wants to fly from some remote town in my home state of Arizona, Flagstaff, and they want to fly to some remote island in the Caribbean, you need to have a price if they ask. There may be only one person a year that flies it, but that price has to be there. So you add that all up, and that's 5 billion plus for a large airline, just an amazingly complicated machine. And then on top of all that, every day is a new day. People have booked, people have canceled. You have to have the machinery and models to redo that the next day, every day trying to be better. So it's all about data and how you make use of it. So in my career, I've talked a lot about for the people that have worked for me, just to think about data being sort of this thing of high value. It's like oil. Oil, we all know, is high value. Oil is what makes the modern economy go. And there's just a lot of similarities when you think about the importance of data conceptually with how we think about things like oil and its impact. So what does that mean? So I'm sure you're familiar with drilling, extracting, monetizing, right? You have drillable data sets. You have to extract data from different data sources. And in our industry, with all those data sets that I just talked about, which have millions upon millions of rows, they sit in data lakes. Data lakes are no good unless you have the statistics and data science to actually draw and extract that information from that data lake. And a lot of times, most cases, we have to build some sort of a pipeline, some extract, transform, load routine, ETL, to move the data to where it could actually be used. And of course, it has to then be refined. It can't just be in its crude form, just dropped onto into the models or used by analysts. It has to be refined. And just like with oil, in the oil business, we have the same result where we actually are able to improve profits by how we take our skills and apply it to data. But the airline industry, just like oil, has been around for decades. And the easy data lakes and data sources have had people like me working on them for the last few decades. And it's getting the easy stuff to exploit has already been found. And so where the future is going to be, to me, arguably is more interesting. I don't think people want to work necessarily on easy problems. I think they want to work on interesting problems. And it's this looking into non-conventional places, using new tools to extract, like AI and some other things we're going to talk about. To me, you're almost like wildcatters now. Wildcatters are those parts of the oil fields that are they're out taking chances, going to new areas of production that nobody had looked at before to see if they can get a competitive edge versus the other folks that are looking more traditionally. And just like a wildcatter, you have to be fast to fail. Not every idea is going to work. Not everything you're going to look at is going to, but that's fine. And yeah, it's an understanding that without nothing ventured, nothing gained, and that it's okay to have some misses, and that the hits that you get of that new area of oil or the source of data that you can monetize is the important one. And this is where operations research, data analytics, this is where folks at Informs are just the perfect match of skill set with need, building hypotheses, testing it, and putting it into production. And that's how I think about how we're talking about on airlines. And one of the things before that talk about, because it's very topical for today, and the changes that are happening in the airline industry, is there's always been a fundamental infrastructure issue since the 1970s that has to be solved for. And that you may not know this, but when you're sitting at a computer, if you look at this image that I use AI ironically to create, there is this, just when you hit enter on, I want to fly from Phoenix to London, there's an amazingly tangled web of things that happen behind you, of creaky infrastructure that's been bubble gummed together and duct taped over the years, and with a number of entrenched players who are all trying to make their buck through the production pipeline as the ticket request gets handed off from place to place, from Expedia to a distribution point to the airline and so on. And we've been wanting the wildcat and look for new areas to exploit models in the revenue management for a long time. But this tangled web makes innovation very, very difficult to do, because if you want to, I have to imagine if I make a change, I have to affect all of that web of tentacles that come along for the ride to make sure that I have consistency in what I'm doing across. So that has been it has been an industry issue for a long time, and it's what it results in. The airline business has been stymied. Everyone points to Amazon as an example of where shopping, and we're all so comfortable using Amazon. Amazon, at least for me, I mean, I don't know how we had life before it. They serve up by creatively using the screen. Other examples of that item, they have, and that would the latitude for the airline would be maybe something more expensive, like an upgrade to first class. We don't really do a good job as an airline business putting these offers out in front of customers. Free, all the different things that are important to customers, free cancellation, ticket holds, all those sorts of things, or even bundling rental cars and hotel. We have to do all this after the fact, after the purchase, after the shop has already happened. We don't even know if you're a loyalty customer. We can't, because you're coming in blind. You're at Expedia, you don't put your loyalty number in. And there's different things that you don't know about that come with your perks that we could analyze in front of you. The bottom line, airlines, because of that tangled web I showed on the last slide, are disconnected from the customer. But change is coming. And if any one of people that are listening today, if you've been listening casually to some of the changes that are happening, you may have heard about this already. This change is called new distribution capability. And airlines are rolling out this new method of ticket sales to modernize. And it's powered by a new standard. I'm going to refer to it as NDC, new distribution capability, as we go forward. And airlines are moving to a different degree with a variety of aggressiveness, because of course, whenever you move to something to replace something that's been for decades in place, it's not something that's done without risk, and it takes some time. Airlines like American Airlines are trying to get to almost 90% of their bookings by next year through this new channel, and they're dragging their content partners kicking and screaming through, but it's coming. And this is going to unlock a lot of things that airlines can do to get to be that more Amazon-like with the shopping experience for customers. Instead of as anybody that shopped, if you had shopped when Expedia started 20 plus years ago, it looks the same today as it did 20 years ago, which is just not right. That's not innovation. Airlines have been unbundling. But checked baggage, advanced seat assignments. I mean, of course, that's made a lot of news and resulting in an amazing amount of profitability for the airlines that without the unbundling, they may actually have be much better, or sorry, worse off from a business proposition standpoint. But because of the need to have things across the distribution landscape being standardized, we can't do this up front in the shop. We have to do it afterwards, or or prior to check-in, or via email campaign. So the idea is that we want to be able to move all of this into the shopping experience, and this new NDC is going to allow the airlines to do this. And I'm going to talk in a little bit about how OR and analytics are going to be super important for how to actually put this in place. So as we talk about NDC and what we can do different as an airline industry, one of the first things that we're going to see here, this is an example I lifted right from Lufthansa, is these industry standards that have been sitting around for multiple decades. Believe it or not, we could only have 26 priced fares in a market because there were 26 letters to the alphabet. And when people founded these things many, many decades ago, they never thought you would ever need more than 26 fares. 26 seemed like more than enough for any reason. Well, turns out you could actually make use of many, many more fares than just 26. And what this Lufthansa slide shows is what they're doing is they're using this new NDC to be able to fill in the gaps in those 26 fare points that may have been filed before, where you see this you're probably familiar with price quantity curves. If you're not, just real quick, you could have $1,000 fare that maybe one person would buy, and you could have $100 fare that 300 people would buy, and then you connect the dots between there. And then if you have a 200-seat airplane, that kind of gives you a sense for what the revenue possibilities are for that particular flight. You don't want to just sell one seat, and you also don't want to sell all 300 seats at the lower price. So what companies like Lufthansa are doing, they're using OR analytics people to take that skill set and fill in the PQ curve. And you see it here in yellow. There are times where a 275 euro fare maybe doesn't make sense, and you could put a 265-year-old fare out and draw a booking you might not have otherwise received because the competition might have booked it, or or you may have just lost because of the 20 euro increase from the fare and the step below it. It's just a bridge too far for that particular passenger. So you have the ability to fill in that white space in the curve. Instead of having a stair step, it becomes linear, and it allows for a much more optimal capacity utilization of these, especially larger planes like Lufthansa have in that wide body example we have here. So this is called continuous pricing, and we're seeing airlines are moving very aggressively. United's been very public in their Wall Street disclosure, saying they're over 40% of their bookings now are what they call continuously priced. In other words, they're using algorithms behind the scene to modify fares, like I show you here on this Lufthansa slide, and they're saying it's generating outsized revenues for them, as just one example of how airlines can be different with this new NDC standard. And I'm going to go through one other example, and then I know we want to leave time for questions here. One other example is, of course, I talked earlier on about revenue management, the right price at the right time to the right customer. We have an example of one route, New York to Los Angeles. You have a solar passenger booking one way for tomorrow, or a family of 4 booking a month from now. When a customer shops, the results they see are the same. Now the prices may be different, but then I'll go through where the opportunity lies from this thing called personalization. Again, coming back to the Amazon example, Amazon knows you, airlines don't, but there's value to be had from personalization. So using that business example, this is what I call a shopping funnel, where you do a query, then you see the results, and you pick, you purchase. That's referred to as a funnel. In today's world, you get your query and you just see flights to come back, and then you see something, there's a rudimentary upsell after you select to go maybe an upgrade or some element of refundability, and then you're off to your purchase. In the NDC world, what happens is you're able to add new elements because you're taking as data that if you're a single passenger flying one way close to departure, you're likely to be business. So rather than just showing them a random sort, I'm going to show them the morning nonstop that business travelers tend to want to take because they want to get to where they're going to be. And they're interested in Wi-Fi. They're also interested in having an advanced seat assignment, and maybe their status gives them a seat with more leg room. They're going to want refundability and changeability. They're going to want the ability to upgrade. But you see at the bottom of the list is price. And most Expedia or any other distribution channel, I happen to use Expedia here, it doesn't matter, will sort based on price. Business travelers are shopping with what I call OPM, or other people's money. There's expense accounts. They're getting reimbursed. The other elements, those first 5 things, are far more important to them than price. And we don't do any job today of showing them that, and I show an existing example in a circle here. If American's competing with Delta and they know that you're a frequent flyer member, show that we've got free Wi-Fi and we've got a main cabin extra seat available, and draw that customer's eyes to that flight, and compete on those product features that we know are important to them. That's personalization as applied to a business passenger. We can't do that today, but NDC does allow for airlines to do this, and this is going to be a big change, to me, revolutionary. That example of the family of 4 that I talked about that wants to fly round trip. Well, same exact idea. All we're doing is, okay, we're sorting by price, and if you look at what's most important to a family of 4, I show you it's price, right? I mean, they're typically price sensitive, but they also want to sit together. And they may have checked bags because they're flying with young children and everything else that goes along with a longer trip that's for something leisure. And by knowing that that they either have status with the airline, could show that the first bag is free on this Delta flight. Or I show here with the square boxes that what is the likelihood that seat has enough empty seats still to be had, that if they were to book, that there's chance that they're all going to be together, and so on. So basically the idea is at the time of shopping, use personalization to guess, I should say, using data to drive that guessing as to what's most important, and put that in front of customers so that you can personalize what's being offered and drive greater conversion. All right, so that's sort of the architecture behind what NDC is doing. But for the audience today, what I wanted to talk about today is how once you have unlocked sort of that personalization concept, what do we need people to actually do? Well, there's this idea of dynamic bundles. So that's where you use that personalization to combine things like I talked about, the business traveler wanting Wi-Fi and a seat assignment near the front. That's a dynamic bundle. I have to use math to come up with what those bundles look like so that we're driving either upsell or additional, in some way, additional revenue while giving the customer what they want, and the airline actually making more money because they're being more creative in how these bundles are being built and presented. That's one area that Aura Analytics is going to play. There's also going to be this area with ancillary ranking. So we have to guess, what are people going to be most interested in seeing? We have limited real estate to work with. We don't want to overwhelm people with possibilities, and so you put math into strategically ranking these things in ways that drive the most revenue, A/B testing, models, new sources of algorithms, things like that. All this is TBD. This is greenfield. This NDC technology is really getting rolled out in the next few years. And to me, it's one of the most exciting times to be in if you want to do something new and put a mark in an industry. All of this needs to be determined. All of this has to be built. And dynamic pricing. We talked a little bit about the continuous pricing of things. But all those dynamic bundles will need to be dynamically priced as well, in addition to the base seat. So you have continuous pricing on sort of the entry point to the airplane, to your seat. That's being dynamically priced. And you also have these ancillaries and bundles also being dynamically priced. And there's all these different factors around what forecast demand, time of booking. Do I want to offer a lower fare because I know I'm going to get a higher ancillary spend, which is something like carriers like Spirit and Frontier are famous for. At the end of the day, driving higher average revenues by giving more choice, and airlines being able to leverage that choice into not just being something that's good for customers, but good for the airline's bottom line. So putting it all together. So we have everything I described. It's going to combine it's still going to be flying A to B. Airlines aren't changing that, of course. But we have that continuously priced fare with a personalized ancillary bundle. And then we're going to create these offers. It's not just going to be queries with priced or ticket prices. We're not going to be thinking about ticket prices anymore. We're going to be thinking about offers, airlines making offers, and they're going to be personalized to that customer at the time of shop. Not going to need to lean on email campaigns or various check-in offers and things like that. We can do it at time of shop. And operations and research and analytics folks are going to be the ones that are going to provide all the insights and all the algorithms and drive these underlying offer engines, which is what are going to need to be built. Of course, very complex, millions upon millions of these route price combinations that I talked about several slides back. Think about how personalization now, it's not just the route network and all its complexities. Now it's business travelers, families, when they're booking, the type of customer, exponential growth, and what the possibilities are. It's going to be quite frankly mind-blowing. The traditional models that I came up with that were my bread and butter are not going to be nearly as useful anymore. So AI is going to become very important to help make sense of all this. I mean, of course, AI is a catch-all, and I'm not really going into in this presentation the different elements of AI. That could be for another day. But we're going to need skilled folks to actually create and manage these things. And the airlines that move fastest and do this the most smart, or the smartest, I should say, are going to be the ones that are going to win. So it's going to be super competitive going forward. Now, I'm not going to actually talk about AI models, because there's so many different flavors that we talk, there's the GPTs and various other things that are, everyone's talking about that make the news today. I'm not going to talk about that, but I am going to talk about just some of the underlying possibilities to get you thinking about how I'm able to use these models in new ways. So airlines today, you see in the green circles, they have their internal data. They know what are revenue trends in, what in terms of what people are, how much they're paying. We know what their bookings are. We know where they're choosing to fly, where their bookings are being held. We know what schedules we have, and that in the past has been sufficient to build models to build an expectation of how things should be going forward, so that I can price accordingly. However, what's going to happen if you're going to personalize and also take advantage of third-party structured and unstructured data sets, we can do things much better. We can use macroeconomic trends. We can use our competitive capacity changes. We can use school calendars for spring breaks. We can, we can bring in sporting events like the Super Bowl. We can social media listening. I've seen many examples where even on Twitter, we learned about things happening in the airline world well before we even knew what was happening in our own data. So finding some ways to bring outside data sources in. Hotel capacity. If hotels are sold out and destinations, you might not have as much demand to fly there because you have no place to stay. Same thing with rental cars. And then shopping data. Shopping data, what I refer to here with shopping data is competitive shopping data, getting access. And there are vendors that package this up. They basically pose as shoppers and return results, bundle up and sell to airlines, using how to use that shopping data to incorporate what your competitor is doing, how they're personalizing and so forth to enrich your model set is going to be some of the next generation modeling that's going to be needed, and where the interesting work is going to be coming. There's many more bubbles here. I just kind of sort of hit on some of the ones that I see as big ones that are quick opportunities to be had. And all of this needs to be boiled together to come up with a price. And moving to that personalized offer world, what does a dynamic bundle look like, and all the other things all gets boiled together. But one of the things I like to, and I've seen throughout my career, that complexity is not necessarily good if human beings can't understand it. I'm sure people have seen The Matrix, but there's an example. It's just my analog for I can't make sense of that. That's gibberish to me. And if humans can't interact, if humans can't manage it, there's always going to be the place for guiding the machines through those turns in the road that the machines don't know about. Of course, things like COVID would be a great example where the airline world shut down for a few days. How you react to that is always going to be this human element to these very unique events that happen. And if you build something so complex that analysts and people can't understand it, you create yourself a failure point. And it's something I wanted to reinforce. So there's always a balance here that has to be struck. And along that balance, things that I've always told my staff during my time at the airlines, there's two big philosophers, if you will, that I lean back on. There's Occam's razor. So Sir William of Occam, a 14th century philosopher, basically said, all things being equal, the simplest solution is usually the best one. So that's Occam's razor. You can cut right to when you have several choices and you're not sure which way to go with the simplest one. Try that one first. And in my experience, that tends to be enough, at least as a starting point to work from. And then George Box, a statistician, 20th century, all models are wrong, but some are useful. So what I used to tell my guys is, you're never going to be able to build a perfect model that encapsulates everything in a perfect way. That's okay. Don't let perfection be enemy of the good. You can have by getting things in market and learning, that's useful. So it's get off of what some people call top dead center, like where an engine gets stuck. Let's get off of being stuck. Let's get models out there. Let's learn and let's keep moving. So now I'm kind of coming into the last bit here, but as we sort of boil that all together, it's the characteristics of a successful operations research or analytics shop that I've seen at an airline is hiring you guys, smart and motivated, and then being empowered, and then creating that culture where you're willing to experiment and be wrong, and that you're protected when you're wrong, that by being wrong you don't have consequences if it was it was come from a place of data and not just essentially just looking at something wrong. Protect people that are willing to be entrepreneurs and take chances. Generate those new ideas, keep them as simple as possible. The Occam's razor I talked about. Get it out into the marketplace. Don't let perfection be enemy of the good. The George Box example I had. Fail fast, learn from active and limited market A/B testing of a prototype, and then have a culture where an organization can be nimble and take those examples that do survive that fail fast, those A/B testing, put it into production, and so you can reap the benefits of it, but then iterate and come right back to the new ideas again. And you have to be constantly working out there, constantly trying new things, thinking about things in a new way. That's what makes for a successful RM shop. And that's what makes for successful people that are coming from an OR analytics background. That sort of trait, if you have those traits, then an airline is going to be a good place for you to land. And then finally, I think this is my last slide, know the business need. Take the time to understand what your customers, walk a mile in their shoes if you can, ask questions, be approachable, work with people on the other side that have to use these algorithms. They live in a very complex world, and for all the reasons I described, it's going to get more complex. They've already suffered from analysis paralysis, where you have so much data, you don't know where to go next. We're going to be throwing all these new things at them, and their life is getting is going to be a lot harder. Understand that life, and understand where they're coming from, so you can be better on the front end. And then don't allow the AI and various other things that are going to be add so much complexity that it's just black box, ununderstandable. Not good. That's not good for anyone. And then, of course, that leads to maybe costly mistakes and some other things. And then we can't just diminish the very important part of high quality analytics. Visual, drillable, and allowing for independent discovery. Always been important in this business of complexity. It's how we build these things in the future is going to be even more important, because it's going to help us peel back the layers of that black box and make it more understandable, and help with analysis paralysis by providing some guided workflows and some other things. So all of this is greenfield. All of it's going to need to be built in this new world of NDC, and I believe it's going to be a very exciting time for airlines, and in particular revenue management. With that, that's it. Let's wrap this up and turn it over to some questions. Appreciate your time listening to me talk. And if anybody has any questions or follow-ups for me, please feel free to reach out. And I hope I gave you an insight into some of the things that are coming. And with that, we'll turn it over to questions.
Thank you very much, Dan. Very nice presentation, and also thanks for keeping the time so we can have some questions now. There are already some questions in Q&A, but I invite the participants to ask more questions. We should have time for a couple questions more, so please do so. We have a question from Ankit Singh that says dynamic bundles are good for airlines, but some customers will like to see the limited offers, as too much options on the plate might impact the customer experience. Can we optimize and put limited choice rather than unlimited choices, or should we allow all the multiple offers to the customers?
That is a wonderful question, and it's something, quite frankly, airlines are still figuring out. There's certainly an element of personalization that comes into play here. So if you have for example, I was talking about the business traveler versus a family of four. There are what I would call seasoned power travelers that fly many, many times a year. We've had customers that would fly 50, 60 times in a year. They're a very, very small minority of business. But if you know, because of loyalty programs and various other things, that they are sort of power business travelers, we know from surveys and things like that, they actually want to be empowered with choice, and they welcome the ability to sort of custom build their own bundles or have more choice presented to them. So that's where power personalization can help with what you're talking about. And then the flip side of that coin would be an airline like where I worked, American or United or any large airline, 80% plus of people are only fly once a year or less. And they don't want to be overwhelmed with choice. So it becomes a guess of what are they most interested in? Those one or two things, maybe three tops, that instead of making for a more difficult shopping experience where they may go to the competition that's easier to do business with, let's hit them up front with what we think is important to them and tailor the offer using that personalization to make a simpler booking experience. Because that 80% of travelers just don't want that complexity. They just want to book and be gone and get back to their family, right? And so I think that's a great question, and I think that there's going to be a lot of optimization and modeling, because a lot of this has to be done in real time to provide that right balance.
Thanks, Dan. Another question is the participation of a community like ours to develop methods for this revenue management development. One of the things that we see as a problem is the access to data. So academics have limited access to data that can allow them to develop applied methods to revenue management. How do you think then that we can overcome this limitation for us?
That's a great question. And I, having firsthand been, when I was managing director at a large airline, I was frequently faced with academics that wanted to work with me to work on these problems. And quite frankly, there's a lot of you and not a lot of us. So it's a bandwidth problem. So what we ended up doing is we ended up, there's a few places, University of Georgia, MIT, that actually had stood up transportation-related specialties where they had PhD candidates and their advisors who all they pretty much did was work on airline problems. And we felt that because we had, of course, with our limited bandwidth, we had to sort of concentrate our efforts on just a few. So I would say that there's lots of ways to solve for this, but one would be to either ally with like Laura Gallo at University of Georgia, Peter Bellababa at MIT. There may be some partnership you can have with them because they have access to a lot of this data, or there's it's old-fashioned networking in terms of getting access at either conferences or to the right people that can make these decisions. I will tell you that I just told you there's maybe a little bit disconcerting on the bandwidth side. I don't want to discourage you too much, because when we did work with academics, we got a lot of value out of that. And the value came in two ways. One, we got new ideas. We got fresh ideas. We started working on new ways of vector models, for example, back when they were a new thing because of a partnership we had. It's going back a few decades, but just getting, because you guys are we're so busy heads down on solving today's problems. You guys are looking out into the future, and there's value to be had from hearing that perspective and getting that in front of people. And then the other part of it was, of course, we loved hiring your students. So you sort of self-selected people that were interested in airlines because they're interested in looking at airline data and solving these problems. We got to know them. They were a very good hiring pipeline to bring people in. So it's kind of navigating that fine line between how much is enough and having access to the right people. And that's how we sort of approached it.
Okay. Yeah, nice tips there. I have another question now from Kees Verhulst. And Kees asks, in the examples you provided on personalization, the data gathered on the customer is purely from their search query. Do airlines, or will airlines, make use of more personal data to better predict what they should be offered? like their purchase history, credit info from airline linked credit card, etc.?
Absolutely, absolutely. So we have to be careful here because we don't want to use customers' information against them. In other words, there's a fine line between using the fact you have a credit card and various other things like a loyalty program to try to charge you more, because you very quickly just stop giving that information and we lose you from a personalization opportunity standpoint. And my belief is using that data to personalize things that are more interesting to you, and not waste your time. Like, for example, if I know you're a co-brand is like, for example, like you have the American Airlines credit card. That's a co-brand credit card. And with that, you get a free check bag just because you have the credit card. If I know that, why waste your time offering a free bag in a dynamic bundle? We should hit that up front and recognize your status and say, and thank you for being your loyal customer. You have a free bag that comes along with this, but here's some other options like that may be available to you, that may be refundability or changeability, whatever else. And but always from a sense of trying to offer these things in a way that you get greater conversion, and not from a sense of trying to penalize the customer with a higher fare because of what they've offered you. That's where the customer wins and where the airline wins, in my view. But yes, definitely all of the information at your disposal, provided that's used responsibly.
You also mentioned in this bundling that eventually multiple products, eventually coming from multiple stakeholders, will be bundled. But then that raises also the challenge on data sharing and confidentiality of this data between partners. How do you see this in the future?
So by partners, are we talking about other airlines? Or are we talking with
airlines? I'm imagining airlines, airports, eventually also service around the airports that are hotels that are put it together in the bundle. How do you see this in the future?
Absolutely. So yeah, there's actually there's data out there today that third-party vendors aggregate and they, for example, there are companies that hotels are interested in solving the same problems as airlines. They want to know what their competition's charging. They have different dimensions on how rooms book versus airlines, but there's still this need for competitive intelligence. And so there's these data providers that focus on that, very narrow focus on hotels or very narrow focus on rental cars, same as with airlines. And what has not happened yet, and has just been loosely talked about, is working with these third-party providers to amalgamate, aggregate the data in a way that's usable by all. And of course, there's entrenched interest here. The hotels that are interested in selling and converting more room nights at a higher price, and the airlines are more interested, of course, on the seat side. And those two don't necessarily always work together. So there's a partnership angle here that has to be hammered out as to how to both mutually benefit. If the Marriott chain teams up with Delta and Marriott gets preferential placement on Delta's booking channel through a bundle, then there has to be sharing of data that has to come along with that. And how that all happens all has to be negotiated and built. And of course, then the value case has to be made for how that would work. I see it myself. But there's a case of both airlines and hotels have been so distracted, and quite frankly, with NDC, there hasn't been the capability of even taking advantage of it. So now that there is this ability to take advantage of it, now let's focus some energy there, and let's see how we can tie together so that we mutually benefit and have those partnerships start. I see that as a very tantalizing opportunity, and that there's just all kinds of low-hanging fruit once those partnerships get stood up.
Another question, Don, you mentioned use of AI and how that can leverage some of the solutions, but currently, how reliable is AI for this type of real-time decisions that you have to do in revenue management?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's one that perplexed me when I was active, actually running the RM development group. And because you cannot, you have to have infrastructure that doesn't create blackouts in data being and prices being served up, right? That's bad for an airline. If you go dark for minutes, never mind an hour or even a day where you're not taking in ticket sales on a $45 billion plus company, you're talking about potentially hundreds of millions of dollars of foregone revenue to competition. So there is, of course, a lot of pressure to make sure that you're up and running and you're providing prices. So the way we did this is we took a multi-layered approach where if we had new models, whether it's from AI or whatever the case may be, is that it would come in first and it would modify what was in production with it by nudging the needle a bit. Instead of charging 100, maybe charge 105. But if my answer didn't come for that 105, I still had that $100 price in the market. In other words, I had my fallback. So the idea is you modify the answers in a way that you have answers going out and you have guardrails. You have smart people looking at the outputs, making sure that you're not doing crazy things like turning that $100 fare not to 105, but to 5. We've actually done that, where you maybe miss a decimal point or something and you get something completely nonsensical. And you find it on Twitter where it just blows up with $5 fares on American. Believe me, you don't want to be there. I've been there. And that culture of empowerment and letting mistakes happen is very important when that happens. And you're talking to a VP about all these $5 fares that you filed and sold. And I had a 20-year career. I've done those things and I was still around at the end because it's important to show employees that that's okay to make a mistake. But your point is valid, is that you can move too fast. And you always have to respect that the bread and butter of having at least something in the marketplace that makes sense and that you're modifying from and learning from.
In this industry that runs so large numbers, big numbers. We have another question. We are recording this session. There was a question here. We are recording this session, but there's a question for you, Dan, from Akit Singh. He asks how Airline is using data for monetization. Are they cross-selling to other without regard to the customer privacy? Asking question with respect to concerns of privacy and personal space.
That's a great question. And there's quite a bit of privacy laws that first of all, airlines have to respect. If you're not familiar with something called GDPR, it's an EU directive that is, in my opinion, one of the strictest in the entire world. And any company that touches business, like a large airline that flies over to Europe, has to respect that. And with severe monetary penalties around release of personal information as they have defined it, names and ages and various other things that, quite frankly, that in my opinion, the data doesn't need anyway. And so there's not only is there the legislative aspect, the legal aspect of this, there's also, I don't believe there's a lot of need for it anyway. And because it comes back down to at an airline that wants to build a durable relationship with a customer for that you want repeat business, you don't want to use their information against them. And if the customer thinks that their data is going to be sold or otherwise used against them, it's potentially what their customers aren't, they're not dumb. They're going to see that, and then that's going to result in book away. So being responsible stewards of this information is very important. One, you don't want to get hit with multi-million or even worse fines. And two, I just think it's the right thing.
Okay, well, Dan, let me just share this for the. I'm going to steal your presentation just to present some dates here for people to be aware. But what I want to say, Dan, is that we appreciate very much your time, your insights, and we have learned a lot. At least I have learned a lot from this hour. I really appreciate that you took the time to give us these insights. So thank you very much. For people attending, also thank you for your time and for your interest. On the screen, I have some information about the annual meeting that will take place in Seattle in October this year, and also information about the awards from our section and you are invited to propose to organize a session. This information is in our LinkedIn, and you can also follow this information in our aviation applications section forum on the Informs website, so Informs platform. So thank you very much. Dan, have a nice day, and I hope you still keep in touch with our community, and I hope to see you around in the future. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you, Dan.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.